Yes, y'all. Welcome, you guys, my noise makers. Listen, guys, I know you guys love helping people. You know, you see them in their pain and you don't like anybody to go through those things, right? You never want anybody to feel what you've been through, and you've been through some things. But it is not your job to save them, right? And I'll give you 3 reasons why I feel like even though it's good intention, it's a bad thing, right? A snake isn't grateful for being saved, right? All it cares about is surviving, and sometimes that means even at the detriment of your own health and your own love, your own heart. You're trying to save people who aren't concerned with your intentions and your love as much as they are about pretty much the benefit they gain from you, right? So a side note, if a person is bleeding and they help you while they're bleeding, that is no longer help. In my opinion, that's love, right? But this goes to my second point. What kind of love is that? Is that coming from a place of love or a place for love, right? Because you might be doing this for love, right? And sometimes being a broken healer, you tend to over give and people please instead of letting your life be the healing factors for others, right? Like, are you healing someone? Are you helping someone because you feel they will, see your value and give you true love? You know what I'm saying? Because it's never going to be the case. Like, we're never supposed to do anything out of a need for love, right? But always from a place of love abundance, right? Because when that love isn't reciprocated in the end, that only leads to more heartbreak and brokenness. And then nobody gets the fruit of our essence in the end, right? And my third reason is Christ said this himself, right? He said that it's better to take the dirt out of your eyes before you help another person, right? Because I remember I used to think that was an assault, right? But then I grew up and I kind of understood like that might be like a little insight to us, like light workers, healers, you know what I'm saying? Noise makers, right? Because you will end up bleeding every time if you forget to heal yourself first before trying to help another person, right? Because we're here to help and not to save, right? My third reason is because you might be interrupting God's work. This part hit me, right? Because you felt the pain of another person and you don't want anybody to feel what you felt before. But sometimes, like some experiences, a person has to undergo those experiences in order for them to get into their purpose and their calling, right? And you trying to play God leaves God out of the equation, right? And it also delays that person's own spiritual growth because you're trying to save somebody for your own validation. So here are a few ways that I believe that you can stop overgiving and overloving, even as a loving person, as a loving giver, an empath, a light worker. For one is to know what season you're in and how much you're required to give, right? Country Wayne said it one time. He said, Christ is his emotional accountant. And I stuck to that, right? Because they asked yourself this question: have you healed yet? Right? Or have you done the work to become aware of your trauma, your boundaries, your weaknesses, your strengths, right? Because, have you mastered them yet? Even though we're not required to give even 75% of ourselves to anybody if we're just at 25%. How's that possible? Right? You're supposed to give at just the right amount according to your measure, and God rewards you according to that, right? Secondly, you have to learn to accept and not to expect. Never give anything expecting to receive from the same source. God said it himself, right? So when you give what you can, you give knowing that God will reward you from a different outlet, right? And then you also accept the fact that even those you love, they are bound to disappoint you at some point. They gave 70 times 7, right? You're supposed to love, but do not trust human beings' words. Let their actions be their fruit, and let your discernment and your boundary be your guide. Every time. Like, embrace uncertainty and embrace change, and don't stress over the little things, right? Like, they do crazy things, they kind of let you down. We'll get to that part, but do not let that become your compass into how much you get, or if you should love anybody in the first place, right? We're not here for validation. We're here to heal somebody and not to save them, right? You will always be required to help, but only at the level at which your cup is already filled by the Holy Spirit and by your own self-work, right? And this leads to my other point. Always identify your own needs and take time for yourself. So key, right? Because you can't move with self-love and self-respect if you haven't taken the time to know thyself and to know what makes you move in the right and the wrong direction. Never. The work has to come before like the actual external giving and whatnot. You have to know what you stand for before you let anybody into your life, and that only happens with the time that you take to self-reflect and to heal. Even in that healing process, you are still expected to give love, but to a certain extent, right? And this goes to my next point. Recognize when you're being taken advantage of. Back to the snake analogy. There's many people like the world is beautiful, but it's also dark as well too. Know how to love and not to expect. Identify your triggers. Make sure you're giving from a place, again, a place of love and not for love, right? So when things go against your boundaries, you know how to say, okay, this is not working for me anymore, and I'm not dealing with this, and it doesn't take away from you, right? If you think about Christ himself, right, as loving as he was, healing people, speaking to them, like impacting their lives, he always knew. He said, I gotta find which scripture it was, and I felt like it just felt like a law of power kind of like statement. Like he said, he interacted with them, he healed them, he cared for them, but he knew not to trust them because they are human beings and their emotions and their heart is valuable. Stick with that same mindset. Love, experience people for who they are without letting your identity becoming embedded in who they are, right? Accept them, but do not expect a certain like outcome from them. Sometimes before, like when I had this law, I used to say, until you guys have made like a contract, some kind of emotional contract or verbal contract about your, like, that's good and all, take it at face value, because even a person who says, I'm going to be with you for better or for worse, or you're my best friend, I'm here for you anytime, that is also just words. And until the actions reflect that, do not trust that. And do not even trust it to do not put that to your heart. You always expect people to be humans, because and another reason too is because you also are a human being as well. Like you could fail too and let somebody down. So you always come with this mindset that I am you and you are me. Like you could break my heart because I have a tendency, I have the ability to also break somebody else's own heart as well too. So with that mindset, you're able to love people as they are, but also always at a certain distance where you don't let your emotions and yourself become so burdened by what they do. Right? So it's important that as a light worker first, like I said before, you do the work on yourself to know what you stand for, what you love, what you don't like. What are your boundaries? Have you fortified your boundaries yet? Have you understood have you made God your emotional accountant, to where you always go to him about anybody that comes into your life and say, Lord, how much should I invest of myself into this person? It's very, very key, because we have such a huge heart as creatives, as light workers, as noise makers, that we sometimes forget about the equation. It's always about and that's why he said, love your neighbor as yourself, which means you've already established the self first before it was about the neighbor. So base it around, okay, the way I love myself and the way I treat myself, I wouldn't want anybody to be treated that way too. Now you're speaking from a place of a certain level of mastery now, when you say okay, I know myself, I know that I've done this now, I've done the work now to know myself and know about love, because I've seen that not only for myself, but for what God has shown me, I'm able to give that to the next person now. Until you do that, you're always going to be giving with good intentions, but always with broken practices, right? Giving over too much, or having no boundaries and having no means of reset. Christ always knew when to leave the crowd and go off by himself, to sit by himself in quiet and solitude, to replenish himself spiritually, emotionally, physically, everything. If he can do that, you're supposed to do that as well too. He's a light worker, you're a light worker. So I hope this kind of blesses you guys. If you guys need to go back over it, just kind of remind yourself of some things, play this video over as many times as you need to. But this right here is just one of my inputs as, noisy boy. But I hope this blesses you guys. I hope you guys are noisy, stay blessed, and keep making noise.